Khazan is a new... Okay, maybe not new by the time I'm done with this video, considering it's my third time re-recording and re-editing this. Deep breaths. Khazan is a new action role-playing game created by Neopol and published by Nexon. I'd never really played a game by Neopol before, so I wasn't sure what to expect. But with the genre being so full of good games from devs that I've never really known, such as Liza P and Wukong, I was more than willing to give it a shot. Originally, I heard that the game is a Souls-like game, but I kind of don't agree with that. But I'll get to that. I'm not going to withhold my assessment. Khazan is a very strong recommendation if, and this is a very big if you're a part of the target audience for the game. Who exactly is that, and why is that important? Let me explain. For context, back when I started playing the game, Hardcore was the normal difficulty, and Easy did not exist. Khazan on Hardcore has been the most anti-casual game I've ever seen in the genre, and I think that's saying a lot considering the giant debate about every game needing an easy mode started because of Dark Souls. There are very few resources, and the enemies are spongy, hit very hard, and have a complex enough moveset that you can't just sight read them. This leads to the game being very high on the difficulty scale, to the point that I don't think I'm their target audience, if I'm being honest. To be clear, this is not a bad thing. It's a very hardcore game that knows its target player base, and it doesn't make concessions for players outside of that target. Though I guess now that they've added the easiest difficulty, it does make it more accessible. I have made a new playthrough to try normal, and I think that the main difference that I noticed is that you do more and take less damage while being resistant to status effects. I've not tried easy, but I imagine it's more number adjustments. I'm also not sure how these changes play into late game, because if I'm being honest, I got bored with the early game combos after being used to how fluid the late game felt. And for the same reason, most of the footage you're going to see is going to be from New Game Plus, because this doofus forgot to record the gameplay as he was playing. Smart guy. I kept the footage used for this recording for the first few missions of the game, so that there are no spoilers. Though I will have some gameplay stuff people won't have on first playthrough, so please keep that in mind. Khazan reminds me a whole lot of Nioh, both in terms of format and in terms of gameplay progression, which is actually a good thing in my book because I love Nioh. The game is structured into a list of different missions that have checkpoints you can load into, allowing you to replay missions and fight bosses as necessary, and it is going to be necessary because of how its crafting system is set, but we'll get to that. This is a change from the Nioh system where you always start at the beginning of a stage, and I really like this change because then I can practice bosses even after I beat them without running through the whole map again every time. Now let's talk about the story and presentation. Khazan was once known as the Great General Khazan. He and his bestie, the Great Mage Ozma, are the two heroes of the Empire who once brought down the feared Berserker dragon Hismar. However, right before the start of the story, the Emperor decided to betray and frame the two of them for conspiring against the Empire, and executed Ozma while torturing and imprisoning Khazan. While being transported, a ghost, later known as the Blade Phantom, takes notice of Khazan's powerful body and tries to take it over, leading to when we were given control. The story is a generally pretty standard revenge story, and despite the twists that they throw at you, it is generally quite predictable. Even so, I'll avoid spoilers so that people who want to go in blind for the story can do so. The presentation of the story is quite straightforward, with cutscenes and gameplay segments focusing on Khazan's current time when he's on his revenge quest, with pretty cool flashback sequences that are told in really pretty art style. I like it enough for what it is. I don't think Khazan's trying to be some masterpiece of storytelling. A simple bare-bones story like this that taxis you from one place to another for cool fights, that's enough for me. That said, I do think that there are still two main complaints that I can make about the story and formatting. The first is that you don't really get enough time to know the characters, so that the attachment you feel when things happen just isn't quite there, which weakens the impact of the story quite a lot. The second is a bigger issue that I noticed though, which stems from a strong dissonance between gameplay and story. Khazan is presented in cutscene and lore as an absolute badass, nigh unstoppable warrior who can make giant monsters stop in their tracks through sheer aura. However, in gameplay, I find myself getting my ass kicked by that same monster for 2 hours straight. Causes a really big disconnect in the feel of the story and gameplay and just takes me out of the moment quite a lot. I actually talked to Tellurian about this a bit because Khazan feels to me like a really composed Kratos. Unstoppable warrior on a revenge quest, nothing can really stop him, and In gameplay, you feel that way in God of War. In Khazan, don't quite feel that. Let's talk about the visuals and the sounds of the game. Visually, I think Khazan is really pretty. It has a very anime-inspired visual style, and a lot of cool shots that really add to the vibe. The areas that you explore are also pretty varied too, so it doesn't get samey too fast, though it will still happen, because side missions still use the main mission areas. Character designs are pretty anime in general, and the attacks do have huge particle effects, so it can be hard to see sometimes. The music in this game is fine. It's nothing that stands out for me, but it does what it needs to without being intrusive. There is one boss track that goes really hard, but since it's a late game boss I don't want to spoil, I will say I really like that track, which is good because I spent 3 hours dying to that boss. The sound design of the game is in general really good. The attacks and blocks have very satisfying sounds, and the dodge has a windish sound effect, especially if you do it last second. Enemy sounds feel very fitting for what they are, and I'm going to be honest, I can't state enough how much I appreciate it when a game actually does it well. The sound cues in the game are really good. They're mostly distinct, so you can actually use it to dodge attacks from off-screen quite consistently. I will say though, that when a boss is making other sound effects or visual noise, it can be hard to hear or see the sound cues for grabs and unblockables. This isn't a major complaint, because it does feel intentional half the time. Okay, so let's talk about the gameplay. This segment is going to be really long, so if you don't want to listen to all of it, please feel free to skip it. However, as a gameplay first kind of guy, I wanted to make this segment to help people like me decide whether they want to get the game or not, especially since I didn't get the game initially because I didn't know what you get access to. I did still buy the game quite early though because of a recommendation from a friend. Shout out to you, Hobo Sapien. So, Khazan is a very varied warrior with a huge arsenal of skills at his disposal. There are 3 main weapon types with their own skill trees and a common skill tree, and a huge amount of customizability on how to approach the game. The aforementioned 3 weapon types are dual wield, which is a sword and an axe, a great sword, which is a great sword, and a spear, which funnily is not actually just a spear, but a lot of different polearms. They all have different branches you can go down in each tree, which lets you invest in different things such as focusing on dodging or guarding, or getting active skills, which you can set the keybinds for. There's a huge variety in what you can do, and if I'm being honest, I don't have time to get through all of it in a YouTube video, but it is a really good game for build crafting, especially when you combine that with gear sets, which we will get to. One thing I forgot to mention as well is that you can refund and respend points at any time, so you're not locked into any specific build too, which I think is a really great format, especially with how difficult the bosses are. Some of the core mechanics of this game are Brink Guard and Brink Dodge. Essentially, if you dodge or block at the last second, then the stamina consumption is significantly reduced, and you get access to different counters that you learned in the skill tree. I think having both gives you a ton of ways to approach each fight, though I do think realistically you'll want to utilize both, especially if you're playing on hardcore, since bosses will absolutely destroy you if you screw up using one or the other. The next core mechanic is counterattack. Counterattack is a mechanic similar to burst counter found in Neo, wherein some powerful attacks can be stopped or countered using a well-timed counterattack, which will deal a lot of damage while opening them up to your own combos. I could not figure out the timing for this for a long time. But essentially, the counter frames start as soon as your counter goes off, so you just have to learn the timing of the attack since it's usually quite delayed, and you'll get used to using it quite quickly. This is a core part of making it so that you can set the pace of the fight at specific points rather than just reacting to the boss. On the other hand, you can unlock a parry mechanic that is quite similar to the Dark Souls parry, wherein you can parry most attacks with a delayed timing that will knock the enemy completely off balance and let you really combo them. I will be honest, I think on first playthrough this mechanic is so strongly disadvantageous to try, because if you screw up, that's like half your health gone, y'all. However, since I went into New Game Plus, the skill point improved parry has felt much more forgiving to use, and having a lot more healing makes it actually not too punishing. Successfully using it lets you really set the pace of the fight, even more so than counterattacks, so players who are really skilled at it can make it work. Next up is the Spirit Bar. The Spirit Bar is a resource you'll have access to once you get into the second stage. The Spirit Bar is essentially a mana bar, with each skill costing a certain amount of spirit to activate. The first skill you'll have access to within the system is Javelin, which is your ranged attack that you can utilize at most points to draw enemies or to snipe ranged enemies to stop them from sniping you. The active skills in the tree all utilize this resource, with some upgraded parts of the basic moveset that will utilize this as well. You can regain spirit just through fighting, with many skill trees dedicated to improving this regain. I will be honest, other than Javelin and the upgraded parts of the basic moveset, I used it in very few cases, with Phantom Heatwave being like 90% of what I actually used. A mechanic that is hidden for a long while is Phantom Form, which is similar to how Devil May Cry's Devil Trigger works. I don't think this mechanic is working properly, because my damage drops like a sack of bricks when I use it. My assumption as to why that is because you don't get bonuses from weapon skill trees, since you have a completely new moveset, which is really cool, but the numbers are just not there. It can save you sometimes if you need room to breathe, and you can upgrade it so that it activates when you're about to die. But I've noticed sometimes it just fails to activate, and I'm not going to trust in an inconsistent mechanic to keep my run alive. In New Game Plus, you can use the gauge to do a bigger finisher than usual, which is a really nice way to not have to use this stupid form. Please tell me if I'm missing something, because it's such a cool form, but it hits like a wet noodle. Let's move on to the maps then. The maps in this game are, as mentioned before, visually very varied. I generally quite like the design, as it's very standard Souls design where the map loops in and opens shortcuts, and there's a lot of secrets you can uncover. Unfortunately, I think that a lot of the time it's kind of boring to traverse, with some really rude design like random death holes in places you'd want to rush, like, say, if there's an enemy shooting from that direction. There are also a lot of enemy spam moments, especially so in side missions, and I'm really not a big fan of it, especially since side missions already reuse part of the main maps. The main story maps are generally fine though, about being fair and fun, so I can kinda let it slide. The bosses in this game are very much the highlight of the game. With honestly fantastic and generally fair boss design, I think it can stand up close to the best bosses in the genre, barring a few fights that I think are kind of bad or annoying. But I think that's kind of something you expect in every game in the genre, so it's not exactly a deal breaker. Though their movesets and attacks are all generally pretty fair, the bosses are generally a bit too spongy for my preference, and with the limited resources you have, it can get quite tedious. One mechanic that I really like though, is that even if you fail to kill a boss, you'll still get souls based on how far you got into the fight. This lets you keep improving your character and making it a little bit easier each time. There is a skill point cap though, which is the more impactful part of progression in my opinion, which stops you from earning more skill points than you're supposed to at the part of the game. I'm not decided whether I like this or not, because a struggling player will have the most need for extra skill points, though I see that they want a very specific level of challenge. The gearing system in Khazan feels very similar to the Neo system, and that can put a lot of people off. I personally really like it because I really like Neo, and I think Khazan specifically does it very well. Each armor or weapon that drops will roll different attributes that boost your stats in different ways. If you wear multiple pieces of a set, you also get a set bonus, which is really impactful and well thought out by the devs. I can't state how cool these set bonuses are, as they can be genuinely build changing in the way it's implemented. To complement this system even further, and reduce the RNG involved in getting pieces you like, you can actually unlock the ability to craft gear from sets if you'd like to. This will, of course, require resources that you'll need to obtain, but I really like that you can make specific pieces at your current level. You can also unlock upgrading gear to bring your favorite pieces to current level as well, though it will require a lot of armor pieces as sacrifice, as they eat pieces that are higher level to upgrade something depending on rarity. To reduce reliance on RNG even more, you can reroll the stats that the gear rolls with. Each reroll does cost more, so there will be a point where crafting a new piece or resetting the reroll counter will become necessary if you want to keep using the same piece. As of reading the script, the developers did drop an update that introduced the ability to upgrade gear rarity and change weapon scaling, as well as gear and skill presets. These are huge improvements that I really wish were there at launch, but I'm happy that it's there now. They also introduced the boss rush mode, which I have tried a little bit of. It's a little bit too difficult in my opinion, but it does fit quite well with how the game feels on first playthrough. Alright, so what's the verdict? I realized that having not played the easier difficulties of the game and then not recommending the game due to the difficulty may kind of sound stupid, and I get it, right? I do. I really do. However, I think that it makes the most sense to me that a game with this level of technical depth and build crafting should be played on the intended difficulty, which is the original normal mode, or as it is now, hardcore mode. I don't think that players that are picking the game up and deciding to play on easy are going to be the same players experimenting with every little detail of their kit to edge out that little bit of extra damage. I would also struggle to suggest the game to the story-focused segment of the player base, because despite how pretty the game can be, the story of this game is actually really weak, and it can be a chore to traverse the maps. For the players in the middle, I still would not suggest it, since I would put myself there, and as cool and hype as all the bosses are to fight and how fun Khazan can be to control, that's like, it feels like that's the only relevant content, especially since the maps are so, well, boring. If you're looking for a mix of story and gameplay, there's many other options that will be a lot more engaging. For players who are looking for an action RPG with a deep gear system and skill system, with a very high skill ceiling and a lot of well-designed bosses to really utilize those mechanics, I think it's close to being a perfect game. For the rest of us mere mortals though, I think you can be the judge of that. Khazan isn't a perfect game, not for me, but I genuinely think that it succeeds in most of the things it's trying to do, and I can respect that a lot, even if it makes it a hard game to recommend. I hope that you found this review informative, and I hope it helped you decide if you wanted to buy the game. I hope you're having an absolutely wonderful day, and I hope to see you next time. Have a wonderful one, and goodbye! If you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping me a like and subscribing to me for more content like this. Comments are also appreciated, since I always enjoy open dialogue and I'm open to having my opinions changed. Have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.